This is the Declaration of Independence. As the United States approaches its 250th anniversary, the national celebration will inevitably center on this specific phrase: all men are created equal. We are taught to revere the men who signed this document. Our national identity relies on celebrating them every 4th of July, maintaining a collective trust that the country's institutions were designed with inherent goodness and guided by Christian morality. Today, political movements are doubling down on that exact narrative. The recent Mandate for Leadership, often referred to as Project 2025, is an administrative playbook written to combat modern cultural shifts and return the government to its original moorings. But looking closely at the historical record raises an uncomfortable question. What if those original moorings were designed to hold some groups in place while allowing others to navigate freely? If the foundation itself is skewed, the entire structure follows suit. Choosing to celebrate a facade without scrutiny preserves a convenient silence. It prioritizes the comfort of the myth over the clarity required for actual national redemption. The ink was barely dry on the Declaration when its authors proved exactly who they meant by all men. In 1790, the very first Congress passed the Naturalization Act. This law restricted American citizenship strictly to free white persons, excluding tens of millions of indigenous people and the entire enslaved population. The ideological blueprint for that exclusion dates back centuries earlier. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI issued the Doctrine of Discovery. This decree provided European explorers with divine religious authorization to conquer the Western Hemisphere. It granted them the legal and moral cover to subjugate, enslave, and kill non-Christians with total impunity. This gap between written creed and violent practice was called out over a century ago by Frederick Douglass. In his 1852 address, Douglass told his white audience that the 4th of July was a sham to the enslaved. He pointed out that the American church, rather than fighting oppression, had made itself the ultimate bulwark of American slavery, rendering it, in his words, superlatively guilty. These snapshots of history, from the Vatican in the 15th century to the first U.S. Congress, illustrate a deliberate architecture. Political and religious authorities synchronized to protect a specific hierarchy, overriding the very principles they claimed to represent. Following the Civil War, the United States had a brief 20-year window to correct this system and reconstruct its identity. Politicians known as radical Republicans, led by figures like Thaddeus Stevens, argued that the defeated South should be treated as conquered territory. They demanded that formerly enslaved people be provided with protective laws and homesteads to survive and build wealth. Looking at this photograph from the era, you can see the massive scale of emancipated citizens gathered outside a freedmen's school building. Congress passed the Freedmen's Bureau Acts in 1865 and 1866 to integrate 4 million African Americans by providing land, education, and legal protection. The existing power structure immediately fought back. President Andrew Johnson repeatedly vetoed the Freedmen's Bureau legislation. He argued it infringed on states' rights and that the federal government shouldn't provide specific aid to a single group of people. Without sustained federal protection, that brief window of opportunity collapsed. The withdrawal of national support left Black populations exposed to another century of targeted violence and legal disenfranchisement. The United States possessed the legislative tools for racial repair. But when forced to choose, the dominant power structure prioritized its own self-preservation over justice. To maintain the illusion of a righteous founding, modern society relies on what scholar W.E.B. Du Bois called the propaganda of history. Trusted sources, parents, teachers, and politicians immerse the public in a sanitized version of the past. When confronted with atrocities, the public uses a psychological defense mechanism. They isolate historical violence as the work of anomalous bad apples, which allows them to preserve the belief that the institutions themselves are inherently good. Project 2025 serves as a modern echo of Andrew Johnson's vetoes. It represents an administrative effort to suppress the historical record, framing the preservation of old hierarchies as a restoration of the Republic. National restoration requires a specific sequence. First, embrace truth leads to understanding the harm. This evolves into confession and remorse, driving genuine repentance. Finally, internal remorse becomes policy. Repentance leads to requesting forgiveness and reconciliation, demanding proactive repair, including reparations, to fix the damage. We inherit a history that we did not write, but we are completely responsible for the society we pass on. True greatness requires the courage to repair historical harm, moving past a curated mandate to find a more honest American redemption.